I need you to venture into the graveyard and speak with Doomguide Volok. Put a stop to whatever Valindra is plotting.
So I said, Neverwinter's not really my thing. This is all orcs and Feywild. I'm more goblins and undead. I mean, it's not like you get to go through a haunted cemetery. And they just looked at each other and then slowly looked back to me. Hey everybody, I'm Cal. And now that you're here, let's talk about Neverwinter. Okay, so in December 2020, when I came back to Neverwinter, you've got to remember that character levels went to 80, and the game had genuine options when you picked where you wanted to go. After the intro, you probably went to Black Lake, but after that, you usually had at least 2 level appropriate places that you could go. And that number actually increased. It was very D&D, where you could weigh the risk versus the reward and maybe earn some cool loot and experience points by sneaking around someplace that was technically more powerful than you were ready for. Kind of like the original Greyhawk characters exploring deeper levels of Castle Greyhawk than they were ready for. Except in Neverwinter, you just respawned. You didn't re-roll. Back then, Neverdeath was a place you worked up to. It was for characters in their mid-20s, and you'd most likely completed a few different adventure zones on your way to reaching it. It was also the launching pad for the first real campaign you could play without getting to be much higher level. But that's for next week's video. Neverdeath was what finally got me to try out the game a second time. For the first 26 levels I played, it was with an eye toward investigating the haunted cemetery. I didn't go early because I didn't want to spend the whole time in a frustrating cycle of live, die, respawn, and it gave me something to work towards. And it was super cool when I finally got there. Part of what appealed to me was the number of instances. This was a location that was totally based on my playstyle. It was me versus the environment, and the environment was awesome. It was creepy and dark, with haunted mausoleums and crypts, with a cool plot line beyond just zombies that started looking for brains. The Red Wizards were here, and they were in league with gnolls, and there was also Valindra's Shadow Mantle, so this felt like it was part of something bigger, too. It had that cool combination of undead, macabre surroundings, and connections to a larger storyline. There were also tons of side quests and a feeling of real danger. Remember when I said it was darker? I didn't mean moral dilemma over what to do with the kobold babies darker. I meant literally darker. There were times you couldn't see what you were doing, and also deadlier. Take a look at this old map I saved from before Jewel of the North made things a little brighter. Those dark sections between the Doomguide part of Neverdeath and the Harper part of Neverdeath, those were bottomless pits. You take a wrong turn crossing those hanging bridges, and you just die. There were cool fumes coming up from the depths. Since Neverdeath wasn't scaled back then, and it was for a slightly higher level experience, you could get in over your head. It wasn't as tailored to the second level character, which would be roughly 8th level in those older terms. Sometimes you'd come back from those other areas in the cemetery, and you just go running down those bridges intent on getting back to the campfire, and you jump in the wrong direction at the wrong time, and boom, you got back to the campfire. Just not the way you intended. There are a few head-scratcher moments in Neverdeath. For instance, the first Doom guide that you save is named Severin. First time I played this, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, when does Doom guide Severin become a traitor? When does he become Severin, the bad guy that you fight during the Tiamat trial? The guy that you chase across Tuern? Was there content that used to exist that was removed at some point that revealed how Severin went from being this white-bearded, good-aligned cleric of Kelemvor to becoming this other person who summons Tiamat and brings evil to the realm as part of the campaign, especially since The other half of Neverdeath introduces the Tyranny of Dragons plotline. It made a whole lot of sense that this was connected at some point, at least in my head. Turns out, this Severin and that Severin, apparently two completely different people. If you know anything about the connection between Severin and Severin, comment below. I would love to find out if there was ever any linkage between these two characters, or if somebody at Cryptic just thought Severin was such a cool name that we needed to have him in there twice. For the most part, though, Neverdeath is nothing but good memories that hold up to this day. A lot of Neverdeath was removed when Jewel of the North streamlined everything, but the campaign that remains is still so much fun, with some really cool NPCs, like this guy.
Foolish adventurer, you have picked up no mere bauble, but the phylactery of Zarafrax, all-powerful lich. Now, prepare for a battle of wills for your very... You know, I'm really just not into this. Let me be upfront with you.
Yeah, Zarafrax won me over the moment he started to speak. And not just because it was the first time I encountered the voice of Kavatos and Grazalax, and I'm guessing about 80% of the other male characters who've shown up recently in Neverwinter. Love this guy's voice, love his sarcasm, love his delivery of these lines. Love Zarafrax. Nothing made me happier than when I realized that Zarafrax isn't just this character in Neverdeath. He actually comes back a little bit later in the game. So much fun to see him again. And it wasn't just that there was a lich in the game. Liches have been around for as long as D&D. They show up in a lot of different places. Secret of the Silver Blades really stands out. An old gold box game. It's a classic. You can find it on GOG. This lich, aside from his existential crisis, which makes him hilarious, you're not fighting him. You're not dealing with him. You're dealing with his phylactery. And you're trying to find a place to put this phylactery. And I really loved that this lich, this storyline in Neverdeath, in Neverwinter, went beyond the idea of a lich as just this skeletal wizard who doesn't want to die, and introduced players early on in the game to the concept of a phylactery. And as you keep playing Neverwinter and you realize how important this phylactery is, when you fight Valindra, you have to understand what a phylactery is to understand that when you kill her, she isn't dead. She's at the bottom, and that's why you can play Valindra's tower over and over and over, because no matter how many times you defeat her, she just goes back to her crystal. And then later on, when you go to Crown of Keldagon, and destroying the Dracolich's phylactery is such an integral part of winning in that trial. I really love from the beginning that they set up this idea of the phylactery. It's something that's overlooked so many times with liches in Dungeons and Dragons, because it's really freaking inconvenient that you defeat the bad guy and then you've got to go find this random thing that could look like anything, that could be anywhere, and if you don't, the lich is going to come back and take revenge. I really love that that's part of Neverwinter, and that it has been all the way back to the moment where you meet Zarafrax in Neverdeath. And finally, this last dungeon, the capstone to the Doomguide part of Neverdeath, with the splashes of color here on the floor, things that look like stained glass, the ornate grill work. And it's not just this really cool haunted dungeon with these really cool 3D elements where you can see where you're going before you ever get there. There's also these really interesting kind of little tricks that if you're new to Neverwinter, you might not see them coming. And I still remember the first time I got to this part of the game, and I stood there for a second trying to figure out, where do I go from here? And my wife and my daughter, who had both played ahead of me, had sneaked into the room while I was getting to that part, and they were both watching me to see what I did. And just that excitement that we shared at that moment of, hey, this is pretty cool. There's this little phantom road that you can run across. This was a really cool shared experience. This was a lot of fun going through this dungeon and finding everything that was in here. Like this little side quest with one of the very few actual jump scares in Neverwinter doesn't really lead anywhere. It doesn't include anything on your quest to defeat Arleon the Unliving. But it really does add to that sense of I'm exploring, just me, maybe my companion, alone in a haunted cemetery, and these creatures pop out and there's the exploding stone. Really effective, really well done. And then Arleon himself. And they've really built this guy up to be so powerful and so dangerous and so hard to control. And another really cool moment is when he animates, and the first thing he does is take a swing at everyone who brought him back to undeath. And then you get to go and basically take him on one-on-one. And it's a really cool boss fight that brings together kind of the end of this first portion of Neverdeath. It's a lot of fun. It's a really cool conclusion to this series of quests. I love the circle on the floor. I love the way he just lies there burning. He doesn't fade away like all of the other enemies. It's just a really cool capstone. And then what I thought was really cool too is when you leave and you go through the portal at the end, you don't have to necessarily run all the way back to the beginning. It's one of the very few times that when you leave, there are people there. And in a really cool storytelling moment, Doomguide Volok has sent these other Doomguides to come get you and bring you back to camp. It's a really cool way to wrap up the end of your expeditions into the Doomguide part of Neverdeath. And that wraps up our first video on Neverdeath. Come back next time for the Harper side of Neverdeath. Really hope you liked what you saw here. If you did, please like and subscribe and let us know that you'd like to hear more. And we'll look for you next time when we talk about Neverwinter.